Joining me today on the Capital TV show, General Chuck Wald. He's former Deputy Commander of United States European Command. You are most welcome.
Nice to see you, Amy. Thank you.
General, you have had excellent experience in the military and the Air Force in particular. Has the Biden administration been keen on enhancing and preserving America's strategic Air Force deterrence capability?
I think from an Air Force perspective, I think all of the recent administrations have done a good job of supporting the U.S. Air Force and our growth from modernization and meeting the modern threats we are in the future. So I can't speak for the other services. I can't speak for other foreign policy experts, but from an Air Force perspective, I think the administration has done a good job.
All right. If we're going to talk about China, Taiwan, do you think that Chinese Air Force can hit Taiwan and defeat the Chinese nationalists?
Well, there's certainly, it's a really good question because we hear a lot about Taiwan and the China threat to Taiwan. The advantages China has is they're very close to Taiwan. They're just next door. Mm-hmm. And so similar to what we thought was going to happen in Ukraine with Russia, because Russia had logistics lines right up to the Ukrainian border so they could support themselves. Many people thought the Ukrainians wouldn't do very well against the Russians. And as it turned out, the Ukrainians have done extremely well against the Russians. Matter of fact, there are those that say Russia used to be the number 2 rated military in the world before Ukraine, and now they're the number 2 military in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And that has to do with the logistics support and, of course, their leadership and I guess you'd call it doctrine, but strategy and tactics. We have the same situation, similar at least with Taiwan, with China because of proximity. And of course, we're a long ways from Taiwan, and the defense of Taiwan would be a lot more difficult for the U.S. But I think what China might be, what they may undervalue is I think we have a superior technology capability in training and doctrine. Mm. I think the real question is, should the United States take a chance with an all-out war with China to defend Taiwan? That's not my decision to make, but it's a big issue. And frankly, I don't think we did very well militarily when we left Afghanistan. So, the jury's out on being overly confident, and we have to be very careful. But I think the Chinese would be making a big mistake if they started hostilities in the South China Sea or against Taiwan, let's say.
On the other side, Iran supplied Russia with drones. How will this change the outcome of the war in Ukraine?
Well, I think it'll always help Russia to have more equipment. Obviously, they don't have enough of their own UAVs or drones, if you want to describe it as such. But I don't think UAVs or drones are going to change the equation of the ineptitude of Russia. They just have not done very well, and they're not performing as you would expect a 21st century military with the investments they have, the resources they have, to be performing as poorly as they are. Again, though, the implication here is that the Iranians are supporting the Russians, which again kind of starts evolving what the international community is. It's Iran, Russia, and people like that against Western democracy. So I think Iran is reaching out to try to make sure they're relevant, to make sure they have some partners in the world. But Iran is inevitably the government there will fail because they're basically corrupt. They don't have the morality to stand up to their citizenship. Their citizens will eventually rise up against them. And I think it's kind of a sad documentary that Iran has to try to make themselves relevant by sending equipment to Russia, and even worse, that Russia has to depend on an Iranian government to help them succeed in Ukraine. It's going to go down in history as a real bad scenario.
The Russians must be desperate to go on this move. In your opinion, does the Iranian Air Force have the delivery system to carry a nuclear weapon?
No. I don't believe they have it currently, because I don't think they have a nuclear weapon that would fit on an airplane, or a weapon to carry that on an airplane, or even on a missile. The problem is missile technology exists, airplanes exist. The Iranians, just like the Russians, and the Chinese for that matter, steal technology like crazy. So the hard part is to develop a nuclear warhead. I think a delivery system on an airplane or a ballistic missile probably is easier. So the fact that if Iran were to have a nuclear weapon would change the equation in the Middle East dramatically. I think that's one of the worst things that could possibly happen, is that Iran has a nuclear capability.
What is your knowledge about their nuclear program right now?
Well, it's probably the same as you. As we read, they've enriched uranium to 60%, and from the 3.7% that was restricted for basically civilian or non-military use. I'm told, I'm not an expert on nuclear weapons, but I'm told that the 60% to 90% enrichment that's needed to make a weapon is a much easier step than it is to get to 60. And you have the Iranian current government under Khomeini and Reza that claim their number one objective in the world is to destroy Israel. And right after that is destroy America. So when you have people like that in leadership positions that have voiced that objective clearly over time, and they could have a nuclear weapon to really make things very complicated in the Middle East, that's a that's probably the most dangerous situation in the world we could have.
Do you think that the Iranian resistance can hold Ibrahim Raisi, the Iranian president, accountable?
Well, I mean, I think they are holding him accountable. It's a matter of whether they can get him out of power, and whether there's with Khomeini and Raisi have enough strength with the IRGC and the other entities they control to keep the population under control. My feeling is it's inevitable. The Iranian opposition to the current mullahs that are leading the Iranian government will eventually succeed. The Iranian people are inherently a good people. They're smart, they're industrious, they're courageous, and the amount of opposition to the current regime is growing on a daily basis. And I think the disappointment, if you will, or even worse than that, by the Iranian citizenry over the leadership right now is growing and will continue to grow, particularly as the economy fails. And so I think it's a matter of time. I think most people that are on the opposition side would hope it had happened right away, but you've been countering him for a long time, and I think time is on your side. I think eventually the opposition party will get into power, and we'll have a more world-looking a government in Iran that wants to be more part of the rational world, if you will, the Western world.
After close to 20 years since America invaded Iraq, how do you evaluate the things going on there in the country as Iran is gaining more influence?
Personal opinion, but I think the original invasion of Iraq in 1991 to counter the Iraqi invasion in Kuwait was exactly the right thing to do. It was in line with international law. It was to defend a democracy, a legitimate democracy that couldn't defend itself. So in terms of international accepted law, that was the right thing for the U.S. and the coalition partners to do to defend Kuwait. I think the subsequent invasion in 2003 by the U.S. and coalition partners probably was a geopolitical mistake. I don't think we needed to do that. We either had poor intelligence or interpreted the intelligence wrong that Iraq had a potential for a nuclear weapon. And we thought we could make Iraq a Western democracy similar to ours. That's not going to happen. You have to accept the fact that people want to live their lives the way they want to. But I think we look back on the invasion of 2003 and and probably it wasn't really an invasion in 2001 against Afghanistan. It was a counterattack against a big attack on the U.S. And it was punishment against the Taliban. We probably should have left it at that. So both of those large activities where we were going to develop democracies in Afghanistan and Iraq, I think will be looked back on as failures by U.S. policy.
Mm-hmm. Which is sad. Let's talk about Syria. Do you think that the Israelis will keep launching their air raids on inside the heartland of Syria and continue hitting Iranian targets and Hezbollah's targets there?
Absolutely, yes. I think I actually am a very big admirer of the Israeli ethos. I think they live on meritocracy. They've proven they have the wherewithal, the intellectual capital, the drive to have people succeed in life. They're going to defend their country to the end. I don't think they're ever going to try to invade anybody in a big way again. I think they have every intention of defending themselves against Iranians or anybody else that might try to disrupt the way of their way of life. And there's no other military based on their size, man for man, woman for woman in the world. The Israeli military is the best.
My question is going to be about the Abraham Accords. How do you see this, especially the brave move of Mohammed bin Zayed?
I think again, personal opinion. I've had the privilege of knowing His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Zayed. I've met with him in the past, and when I was the commander of the U.S. Air Forces and the coalition in the Middle East Air Forces, I met with him. I've met with him in private several times. I think he's at very least in the top 5 leaders in the world, visionary. I think he's the primary leader in the Middle East that's changed things. The Abraham Accords are just another step in that direction. He's also smart enough to know that he's a small country, although his people are like the Israelis, small group and small country, but really capable. And so I think his concern, just like anybody that's a monarchy, they want to remain in power because they believe that that's the right thing. And his number one priority is to remain in power, not at all cost. He takes care of his people. I've been to the Emirates many, many times. The people in the Emirates love their leadership. Frankly, just like in Saudi Arabia, the young people are really behind His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman. Mm. So I think Mohammed bin Zayed is one of the great leaders in the world. I think between him and MBS and other leaders in the region, and particularly Israel under the Abraham Accords, if that continues to mature, is going to be the change that will change our world for all of us.
My last question, I think, how do you see the contribution of the United Arab Emirates pursues to make the Middle East a prosperous and stable region?
Well, I think that's His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Zayed's objective is to, of course, you eliminate threats. That's part of the stability part, eliminate some of those threats. He's also a realist. Mm. You know, if we're waffling in the U.S. in our policy and we aren't consistent, and he doesn't have the faith and trust that we'll be there if his country is threatened, then he'll do within reason anything he can to develop a capability to defend the country. And you know, there are issues that he's reached out to Russia and China based on our, I guess, waffling as far as how much support we're giving the UAE. I think our foreign policy needs to be a little more realpolitik. We need to be realistic about the Middle East. It's still extremely important. It will remain extremely important. It's not going away, and it's in our best interest to have strong leadership there that is inclined to think like we do, I guess, if you will, from a more monarchies are not democracies, but they do take care of their people.
Yeah, which is
I think that's okay.
General Wald, this leads me to a question about your evaluation of the Air Force power of the UAE.
Well, they're as good as anybody. They're for what size they are. They're excellent. They've got excellent leadership. They've got excellent equipment. They've got excellent doctrine. I'm not going to evaluate them against the Israelis or the U.S., let's say, but they're certainly way better than the Iranians or any other country in the GCC, let's say. They're the best.
Mm-hmm. General Chuck Wald, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your presence on my show.
Nice to see you.
Hey, Maria Malouf here. Please click to like and subscribe to Maria Malouf TV YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.